Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
For more than a decade, the world of vampires, werewolves, and forbidden love has remained one of the most iconic fantasy romance universes in modern cinema. Ever since the final chapter of the saga concluded years ago, fans across the globe have continued to speculate about whether the story could ever return to the big screen. The emotional ending of the last film felt like a conclusion, but the powerful fan base surrounding the franchise never truly stopped hoping for another chapter. Now, discussions and rumors surrounding a possible continuation known as the Twilight Saga 6, 2026, have once again sparked excitement among longtime followers of the story. While official confirmations remain limited and much of the information circulating online is still evolving, the idea of returning to the mysterious world of vampires and werewolves has created a wave of curiosity and anticipation among fans who grew up with the saga. The original saga became a cultural phenomenon when the first film, The Twilight Saga, introduced audiences to a quiet town where supernatural secrets were hiding in plain sight. The story centered on the deep and complicated love between a human girl and a vampire, a relationship that challenged the boundaries between two very different worlds. Over the years, the franchise expanded its narrative with several sequels that explored loyalty, sacrifice, supernatural politics, and the constant struggle between love and danger. Because of this strong foundation, the possibility of another chapter naturally raises questions about where the story could go next and which characters might return. One of the most talked about aspects of the Twilight Saga 6, 2026, is its potential cast. Fans have always been deeply connected to the original characters, especially the central trio whose complicated relationships defined much of the story's emotional depth. Many discussions online suggest that if a new installment were ever to happen, the filmmakers would likely attempt to bring back some of the familiar faces that made the saga unforgettable. The characters who once navigated the dangerous balance between the vampire world and the human world remain the heart of the franchise, and their return would immediately reconnect audiences with the story they once loved. Another possibility that fans continue to debate is whether the new film might introduce a new generation of characters while still maintaining connections to the original storyline. The ending of the previous saga left room for future developments, especially with the next generation of characters who could carry the legacy forward. If the rumored sixth installment moves in this direction, viewers might see younger characters stepping into the spotlight while the original heroes take on more guiding roles. This kind of storytelling approach would allow the franchise to expand its universe while still honoring the emotional journey that audiences have followed for years. The world of the saga has always been more than just a simple love story. At its core, the franchise created an entire supernatural society with its own rules, traditions, and power struggles. Vampires in this universe are not simply creatures of the night. They belong to organized groups and ancient alliances that control their behavior and maintain secrecy from the human world. The introduction of werewolves added another layer of tension, as the two species have a long history of rivalry and uneasy coexistence. Because of these complex dynamics, a new chapter could easily explore fresh conflicts that arise when old agreements begin to shift or when new threats appear. If the rumored continuation truly happens, one of the most exciting elements would be the storyline itself. Fans have long wondered what life looks like for the characters after the dramatic events that concluded the previous films. The transformation of key characters dramatically changed their roles within the supernatural world, and a new installment could explore how they adapt to their new identities and responsibilities. Life after the final battle would not necessarily be peaceful forever, especially in a universe where power, loyalty, and ancient laws constantly collide. Speculation surrounding the potential plot of the Twilight Saga 6, 2026, often centers around the idea that a new supernatural threat might emerge. The previous saga introduced powerful vampire covens from different parts of the world, each with unique abilities and motivations. This global network of supernatural beings means that countless untold stories could still exist within the universe. A new antagonist or a previously unknown faction could easily disrupt the fragile balance that was achieved in the earlier films. Such a conflict would naturally force the original characters to reunite and protect both their families and the peace they fought so hard to achieve. Another angle that fans frequently discuss is the possibility of deeper exploration into the mythology of the saga. Throughout the earlier films, audiences were given glimpses of ancient legends, vampire abilities, and the mysterious origins of supernatural powers. However, many of these elements were only briefly touched upon. A new chapter could dive deeper into these mysteries, revealing secrets that have remained hidden for centuries. Expanding the lore would not only make the universe richer, but also provide fresh storytelling opportunities that go beyond the original romance-focused narrative. Of course, the emotional core of the saga has always been relationships. Love, friendship, loyalty, and family bonds played a crucial role in shaping the decisions of the characters. If a new installment continues the story, these emotional connections would likely remain at the center of the narrative. Fans are especially interested in seeing how the characters' relationships have evolved over time. The passage of years could bring new challenges, especially as the supernatural world continues to evolve around them. Another important aspect of the rumored project is the visual style that originally defined the franchise. The earlier films were known for their atmospheric cinematography, misty forests, and dramatic landscapes that helped create the mysterious mood of the story. The quiet town surrounded by nature became almost like a character itself, symbolizing both beauty and hidden danger. If a new installment is produced, it would likely aim to recreate that same cinematic atmosphere while also updating the visuals with modern filmmaking technology. In addition to the story and characters, fans are also curious about the production side of the rumored film. Questions about which director might take the lead, which studio would handle the project, and how the creative team might approach the return of such a beloved franchise continue to circulate. Reviving a globally recognized series is never a simple task, especially when expectations from longtime fans are incredibly high. Any new film would need to respect the legacy of the original saga while also offering something new that justifies its return. The potential release timeline is another topic that fuels speculation. While the rumored title often includes the year 2026, there has been no universally confirmed release date connected to the project. However, the discussion itself shows how strong the demand remains. Even years after the final chapter concluded, the saga still holds a special place in popular culture. The possibility that audiences could once again experience this supernatural world on the big screen keeps the conversation alive across social media, fan communities, and entertainment discussions. Another element that fans are eagerly hoping for is the return of the emotional storytelling that made the original films so memorable. The saga was never just about supernatural battles. It was about the choices characters had to make when love, loyalty, and danger collided. The emotional stakes were always high, and the characters were constantly forced to protect the people they cared about while navigating a dangerous hidden world. If the rumored sixth installment truly exists, maintaining that emotional intensity would likely be one of its most important priorities. There is also the question of whether the story might explore new locations beyond the settings that audiences have already seen. The earlier films introduced several international vampire covens, suggesting that the supernatural world extends far beyond the forests and towns that served as the primary backdrop of the saga. Expanding the story to new regions could introduce fresh cultures, different supernatural traditions, and new alliances or rivalries that reshape the narrative at the same time. Nostalgia remains a powerful force behind the excitement surrounding the rumored project. Many fans who followed the saga during its original release grew up alongside the characters. Returning to this universe would not only be about continuing a story, but also about revisiting a piece of cinematic history that defined a generation of fantasy storytelling. The emotional connection that audiences feel toward the saga is one of the biggest reasons why the idea of another film continues to generate such intense interest. Even though concrete details about the Twilight Saga 6, 2026 remain uncertain, the ongoing discussions reveal just how strong the legacy of the franchise still is. Whether the project ultimately becomes a full theatrical release, a reboot, or simply remains a concept discussed among fans, the conversation itself shows the lasting impact of the story. The world of vampires, werewolves, and forbidden love still captures the imagination of audiences, and the possibility of exploring that universe again continues to inspire endless speculation about what the next chapter could look like. As conversations about the Twilight Saga 6, 2026 continue to circulate. One of the biggest questions among fans is how the narrative might evolve if the story truly moves forward. The earlier films concluded with a sense of resolution, yet the supernatural world they introduced was far too large to be limited to a single storyline. Because of this, many viewers believe that a potential continuation could focus on the long-term consequences of the events that shaped the original saga. The balance between vampire covens, werewolf protectors, and the hidden human world was never guaranteed to remain stable forever. If a sixth installment were to explore this idea, the story might begin several years after the dramatic standoff that brought together multiple supernatural groups. During that moment, powerful alliances were formed to prevent a catastrophic conflict. However, alliances in the supernatural world are often fragile, especially when ancient traditions and powerful abilities are involved. Over time, even the strongest agreements can begin to weaken, creating opportunities for new rivalries or misunderstandings that threaten the fragile peace that was achieved. Another storyline possibility revolves around the next generation of characters who were introduced toward the end of the previous saga. Their existence changed many of the established rules within the supernatural world. These characters represent a bridge between different species and traditions, making them both incredibly special and potentially controversial among ancient vampire leaders. A future chapter could explore how the existence of such unique individuals might challenge long-standing beliefs about the limits of supernatural power. The idea of identity could also play a significant role in the narrative of a potential continuation. Characters who underwent life-changing transformations during the earlier films would now have years of experience living with their new identities. Adjusting to immortality, supernatural strength, and the responsibilities that come with these abilities is not something that happens overnight. A new film could explore the emotional and psychological challenges that arise when characters must redefine who they are within a world that constantly watches them. In addition to the internal struggles of the characters, external threats could once again push the supernatural community toward conflict. Throughout the original saga, audiences were introduced to powerful vampire leaders who enforce ancient laws designed to keep the supernatural world hidden from humanity. These leaders maintain control through authority and fear, ensuring that any action that might expose their existence is dealt with quickly. If a new chapter were to emerge, it might explore whether these leaders truly accepted the outcome of the previous events or if they are quietly planning ways to reassert their dominance. Another direction the story might take involves the discovery of supernatural abilities that have never been seen before. The earlier films revealed that some vampires possess extraordinary powers beyond enhanced strength and speed. These abilities range from influencing emotions to seeing visions of the future. If the universe continues to expand, it would make sense for new characters to appear with abilities that challenge the existing balance of power. Such powers could become the catalyst for both alliances and conflicts as different groups attempt to control or protect these individuals. Beyond the supernatural battles and dramatic confrontations, the emotional relationships between the characters would likely remain the heart of the story. The saga has always focused on the sacrifices people are willing to make for those they love. Whether those relationships are romantic, familial, or based on deep friendship, they provide the emotional foundation that drives every major decision in the narrative. A new chapter could show how these relationships have grown stronger over time, especially after the characters survive the dangerous events that once threatened to tear them apart. Another important element of the potential film is the setting itself. The quiet environment that once served as the backdrop for the story played a crucial role in shaping the atmosphere of the saga. The mist-covered forests, constant rainfall, and peaceful landscapes created a mysterious tone that perfectly matched the hidden supernatural world living within it. Returning to this environment would immediately reconnect audiences with the feeling that defined the original films. However, expanding the story might also involve exploring new territories that were only briefly mentioned before. The supernatural community extends across the entire globe, meaning there are countless locations where new stories could unfold. Different regions might have their own vampire traditions, unique werewolf packs, or entirely new supernatural species that have never been introduced on screen before. By expanding the geographical scope of the story, a new installment could make the universe feel even larger and more mysterious. Another aspect that often becomes part of discussions about the Twilight Saga 6, 2026, is the possibility of a trailer. If the project were to move forward, the first teaser would likely become a massive moment for fans who have been waiting years to see whether the saga might return. A well-crafted trailer would probably focus on atmosphere, nostalgia, and hints of a new threat rather than revealing too much of the story. Brief glimpses of familiar locations, mysterious dialogue, and dramatic music could be enough to reignite the excitement that once surrounded every new chapter of the franchise. The casting decisions would also play a huge role in shaping the reception of the rumored film. Bringing back original actors would instantly create a strong connection with longtime fans, but introducing new characters would be equally important if the story aims to move forward. Balancing nostalgia with fresh storytelling is one of the biggest challenges any returning franchise faces. The creative team would need to carefully choose actors who can carry the emotional depth and intensity that audiences expect from this universe. Another factor that cannot be ignored is how filmmaking technology has evolved since the earlier films were released. Modern visual effects allow filmmakers to create far more detailed supernatural transformations, large-scale battles, and atmospheric environments. If a new installment is produced, it would likely take advantage of these advancements to create an even more immersive experience, while still maintaining the recognizable visual style that fans remember. The cultural impact of the original saga also plays a major role in why the possibility of a new film generates so much interest. When the earlier movies were released, they quickly became global events. Fans lined up for midnight premieres, discussed theories online, and formed communities dedicated to analyzing every detail of the story. That kind of cultural momentum is rare, and it explains why the franchise continues to remain relevant years after its conclusion. Another intriguing possibility is that a new chapter might explore moral questions that were only briefly touched upon before. The supernatural world operates under strict rules designed to protect secrecy and maintain order. But these rules often raise difficult ethical questions about freedom, justice, and responsibility. A future storyline could challenge these traditions, forcing characters to question whether the system that governs them is truly fair or simply a reflection of ancient power structures. The theme of coexistence between different supernatural species could also become a central focus. Vampires and werewolves have historically viewed each other as natural enemies. Yet the events of the previous saga prove that cooperation is possible when faced with a greater threat. If the universe continues, the story might examine whether this fragile alliance can truly last or if old rivalries will eventually resurface. While the rumored title includes the year 2026, release dates in the film industry often change depending on production schedules, creative decisions, and studio planning. Because of this, many fans treat the rumored timeline as more of a hopeful possibility rather than a confirmed schedule. Still, the idea that the saga could return within the next few years keeps the excitement alive among those who still feel connected to the story. Ultimately, the continuing discussions about the Twilight Saga 6, 2026, highlight the enduring power of the franchise. Even years after the original story concluded, the characters, themes, and supernatural world remain deeply embedded in popular culture. The possibility of revisiting this universe offers a chance to explore new stories while also reconnecting with the emotional journey that first captivated audiences. Whether the project eventually becomes an official continuation, a rebooted storyline, or simply remains a concept fueled by fan imagination, one thing is clear. The world of the saga still holds a powerful place in the hearts of many viewers. The combination of romance, supernatural mystery, and dramatic conflict created a universe that continues to inspire curiosity and speculation as the imagination surrounding the Twilight Saga 6, 2026, continues to grow. Many fans have begun envisioning how the story might open if a new chapter truly moves forward. A continuation of the saga would likely begin with a sense of calm that slowly reveals deeper tension beneath the surface. Years may have passed since the last major conflict shook the supernatural world, and for a while it may appear that the fragile peace created during those events has managed to survive. Life for the characters could seem stable, even peaceful, as they adjust to their roles in a world where danger once surrounded them at every moment. But peace in the supernatural world rarely lasts forever. Beneath the calm atmosphere, there could be whispers spreading across different vampire covens and werewolf territories. Rumors about unusual events, mysterious disappearances, or sightings of unfamiliar supernatural beings might begin circulating quietly among those who understand the hidden world. These whispers might not immediately cause panic, but they would create a growing sense that something unusual is happening beyond the borders of the familiar territories. For the central characters, life after the earlier battles may have brought both happiness and responsibility. Their relationships, which once faced impossible obstacles, may now appear stronger than ever. Years of trust and shared experiences would have created deep bonds that are almost impossible to break. At the same time, the responsibility of protecting their loved ones and maintaining peace within the supernatural community could weigh heavily on their shoulders. Living in a world where danger can appear without warning means that even moments of happiness are often shadowed by the possibility of conflict. Another fascinating aspect of a potential continuation could involve the growth of the next generation of supernatural beings. These younger characters would represent a completely new direction for the saga, carrying both the legacy of their families and the potential to reshape the future of the supernatural world. Their existence alone challenges many of the traditional beliefs that older vampire leaders have followed for centuries. Because of this, their presence could attract attention from powerful figures who believe that such changes threaten the established order. As these younger characters begin discovering their abilities and understanding their place in the world, the story could explore themes of identity and belonging. Growing up within a supernatural family would not necessarily make life easier. Instead, it might create unique challenges that few others could truly understand. Balancing extraordinary powers with the desire to live peacefully could become a central emotional struggle for the new generation. At the same time, the older characters who once stood at the center of the saga would likely take on new roles as mentors and protectors. Their experiences with past conflicts would make them more cautious and strategic when dealing with potential threats. Rather than rushing into battles as they might have done before, they could approach new challenges with patience and wisdom gained from years of survival in a dangerous world. While internal growth and family dynamics could form the emotional core of the story, an external threat might slowly begin to emerge in the background. This threat might not reveal itself immediately. Instead, small clues could begin appearing in different parts of the supernatural world. Perhaps certain covens suddenly become silent, cutting off communication with others. Maybe rumors spread about a powerful group moving through territories without revealing their purpose. These mysterious developments would create a sense of tension that gradually builds as the story unfolds. The supernatural world has always been governed by ancient traditions and powerful leaders who enforce strict rules designed to keep their existence hidden from humans. If a new faction were to appear, it could challenge these traditions in ways that no one expected. This group might believe that the old system no longer works in the modern world, especially as technology and global communication make secrecy more difficult than ever. Such a belief could lead to dangerous consequences. If certain supernatural beings decide that hiding from humanity is no longer necessary, it could trigger a chain reaction that threatens the stability of the entire hidden world. The characters who fought so hard to maintain peace would suddenly find themselves facing a new kind of conflict, one that is not just about survival, but about the future direction of their entire species. As the tension grows, alliances between different supernatural groups could once again become crucial. The earlier saga demonstrated that vampires and werewolves, despite their long history of rivalry, can cooperate when faced with a greater danger. If a powerful new enemy appears, both sides might realize that their survival depends on working together once again. This fragile cooperation could create dramatic moments where old grudges must be set aside in order to protect everyone they care about. Another element that could play an important role in the story is the discovery of new supernatural abilities. Throughout the earlier films, certain characters possessed rare powers that gave them unique advantages in dangerous situations. In a continuation of the saga, the next generation might begin developing abilities that are even more unusual and unpredictable. These powers could become essential tools in confronting the emerging threat, but they might also attract unwanted attention from those who wish to control or eliminate them. The exploration of supernatural powers would also provide opportunities for visually stunning moments. Modern filmmaking technology allows for incredible visual effects that can bring supernatural abilities to life in ways that were not possible in earlier films. Scenes involving telepathic connections, emotional influence, or extraordinary physical abilities could become even more immersive, adding excitement to the story while still maintaining the mysterious tone that defines the saga. As the story progresses, the mysterious threat might finally reveal itself in a dramatic way. Perhaps an encounter between different supernatural groups leads to the discovery that a powerful faction has been gathering strength in secret for years. Their goal might be far more ambitious than anyone expected. Instead of simply challenging the existing leadership, they could be planning to reshape the entire structure of the supernatural world. This revelation would force the main characters to make difficult choices. Protecting their families might require confronting enemies who possess incredible power and resources. At the same time, they would need to decide whether preserving the old system is truly the right path forward or if the supernatural world must evolve to survive in the modern era. The emotional weight of these decisions would likely become one of the most powerful elements of the story. Every character would have something at stake: family members, friendships, or deeply held beliefs about how their world should function. These personal stakes would transform the larger conflict into something deeply emotional rather than simply a battle between opposing forces. In addition to the dramatic conflict, the story would likely maintain the romantic and emotional themes that made the original saga so popular. Love has always been the driving force behind many of the characters' choices, and a continuation would almost certainly continue exploring how love shapes their decisions. Whether it involves long-standing relationships or new romances forming among the younger generation, these emotional connections would help ground the supernatural story in relatable human experiences. The atmosphere of the saga would also remain an essential part of the storytelling. The quiet forests, misty landscapes, and isolated towns that once served as the backdrop for the original films could once again play a major role in creating the mysterious tone of the story. These environments symbolize the hidden nature of the supernatural world, where beauty and danger exist side by side. As the third part of this imagined continuation builds toward its conclusion, the characters might begin preparing for a confrontation that could determine the future of their world. Gathering allies, uncovering hidden information, and strengthening their bonds would become crucial steps in facing the growing threat. However, even as they prepare for the possibility of conflict, there might remain a sense that the situation is far more complicated than it first appeared. The new faction might not see themselves as villains at all. Instead, they might believe that they are fighting for a future where supernatural beings no longer live in fear or secrecy. This perspective would introduce moral complexity to the story, forcing the characters to consider whether their enemies might have a point. By the time this part of the story reaches its final moments, the stage would be set for an even greater confrontation. Alliances would be forming, secrets would be uncovered, and the supernatural world would stand on the edge of a transformation that could change everything. The peace that once seemed permanent would now appear fragile, and every character would understand that the choices they make next could shape the future of their world for generations to come. And as the tension continues to rise, one question would remain at the center of the story. When the time comes to choose between protecting the past or embracing a new future, which path will they take? As the tension surrounding the mysterious new faction continues to grow, the supernatural world begins to realize that the balance they once believed was secure may be far more fragile than anyone imagined. Information slowly spreads among vampire covens and werewolf protectors that something powerful is moving through the hidden world. These reports are inconsistent at first: strange encounters, unknown travelers, and sudden disappearances of smaller vampire groups who once lived quietly in remote regions. But when these isolated events start forming a pattern, it becomes clear that a coordinated force may be operating behind the scenes. For the characters who once fought to protect the fragile peace between supernatural beings, this realization brings back memories of past conflicts that nearly tore their world apart. They understand better than anyone that when powerful groups begin moving in secret, it rarely leads to anything good. Experience has taught them that threats often appear quietly before revealing their true intentions. Because of this, they begin gathering information, reaching out to old allies and trusted contacts across the supernatural world. This effort to reconnect with former allies becomes an important part of the story. The earlier conflicts forced many vampire covens and werewolf packs to cooperate for the first time in centuries. Those alliances were formed under extreme circumstances, but they created bonds that may still exist years later. Now, with rumors of a new power rising, those old alliances might be called upon once again. Messages travel between distant territories as supernatural groups attempt to understand what exactly is happening. During this time, the younger generation of characters continues to grow into their own identities. They have heard stories about the battles that once defined their families, but experiencing the growing tension firsthand is very different from simply hearing about it. For them, the emerging crisis represents their first true test. They must decide whether they will remain in the background while their elders take control, or whether they will step forward and play a role in shaping the future of their world. This generational contrast could become one of the most interesting emotional dynamics within the story. The older characters carry the weight of past mistakes and painful memories, which makes them cautious about rushing into conflict. The younger characters, on the other hand, may feel a strong desire to prove themselves and protect the people they love. These differences in perspective could create moments of disagreement, but they could also lead to powerful cooperation when both generations realize that they need each other's strengths. As investigations continue, clues about the mysterious faction slowly begin to surface. It may become clear that this group is not simply another vampire coven seeking power. Instead, they might represent a movement that has been quietly growing for years, gathering followers who believe that the old rules governing the supernatural world are outdated. In their eyes, living forever in secrecy is no longer sustainable in a modern world where technology, surveillance, and global communication make hiding increasingly difficult. This belief could form the ideological foundation of the new faction's actions. Rather than focusing on domination or destruction, they might see themselves as revolutionaries attempting to transform the supernatural world. Their leaders could argue that it is time for vampires and other supernatural beings to stop hiding from humanity and instead claim their place openly within the world. However, this idea would create enormous risks. The exposure of supernatural beings to the human population could lead to chaos, fear, and violent conflict on a global scale. Governments, scientists, and military organizations would inevitably react to such a revelation, potentially creating a situation where supernatural beings are hunted or exploited. The characters who once fought to protect the secrecy of their world would immediately recognize how dangerous such a transformation could be. As these opposing viewpoints begin to collide, the story could explore deeper philosophical questions about freedom, responsibility, and survival. Is it fair for supernatural beings to live forever in hiding simply because humans fear what they do not understand? Or is secrecy the only way to prevent endless conflict between two very different species? These questions would not have simple answers, which would add emotional complexity to the growing confrontation. Eventually, the mysterious faction might step out of the shadows and reveal itself in a dramatic encounter with several established vampire leaders. During this meeting, their intentions could finally become clear. Rather than asking permission or negotiating peacefully, they might declare that change is inevitable and that the old system will soon collapse whether the traditional leaders accept it or not. This moment would send shockwaves through the supernatural world. Some covens might secretly agree with the revolutionary ideas being presented, while others would see them as a direct threat to everything they have protected for centuries. The supernatural community would quickly divide into factions, creating a tense situation where alliances shift and trust becomes difficult to maintain. For the main characters, the situation becomes deeply personal. Their families, friendships, an entire way of life are now caught in the middle of a conflict that could reshape the future of their species. They must decide how far they are willing to go to protect the fragile balance that allowed them to build peaceful lives. At the same time, they cannot ignore the possibility that some of the revolutionary arguments contain uncomfortable truths. As both sides prepare for the possibility of a major confrontation, the younger generation may discover abilities or talents that play a crucial role in the unfolding events. These abilities might offer new strategies for avoiding large-scale destruction, creating opportunities for diplomacy or unexpected solutions. Rather than relying solely on physical strength, the characters may begin searching for ways to prevent a war that could destroy everything they care about. This search for a peaceful resolution could lead to secret meetings, tense negotiations, and moments where trust must be placed in unlikely allies. Some members of the revolutionary faction might be willing to listen, while others could be determined to push forward no matter the cost. The tension between these different perspectives would keep the story unpredictable as events move toward a decisive turning point. Meanwhile, the atmosphere surrounding the supernatural world continues to darken. Strange events become more frequent, and the feeling that something enormous is approaching becomes impossible to ignore. Even the natural landscapes that once felt peaceful now seem filled with uncertainty. Forests that once symbolized quiet safety might now feel like places where hidden enemies could appear at any moment. Eventually, the story would build toward a final confrontation where the future of the supernatural world must be decided. This confrontation would not necessarily be a simple battle between good and evil. Instead, it could become a clash of visions about what the future should look like. Both sides would believe they are fighting for survival, even if their methods and goals differ dramatically. In this moment of crisis, the characters who once stood at the center of the saga might realize that the greatest strength they possess is not their supernatural abilities, but their ability to unite different groups who would normally stand as enemies. By bringing together vampires, werewolves, and other allies who believe in protecting both secrecy and peace, they might create a powerful coalition capable of challenging the revolutionary movement without destroying everything in the process. The younger generation could also play a vital role in shaping the final outcome. Their existence alone represents a bridge between different worlds and traditions. Because of this, they may be able to understand both perspectives in ways that older leaders cannot. Their voices might help guide the supernatural community toward a solution that preserves peace while still acknowledging that change is inevitable. As the conflict reaches its climax, the story might ultimately show that the future does not have to be defined by fear or secrecy alone. Instead, it could suggest that cooperation, understanding, and careful change might allow the supernatural world to survive without destroying the delicate balance between their existence and the human world. By the time the final moments arrive, the characters may have faced one of the greatest challenges in the history of their hidden society. Some alliances may have been strengthened, others broken forever. The supernatural world might emerge from the conflict forever changed, yet still connected by the relationships and sacrifices that defined the saga from the very beginning. And as the story comes to a close, one thing would remain clear. The world of vampires, werewolves, and forbidden love is far from simple. It is a world shaped by choices, loyalty, and the constant struggle between protecting the past and embracing the future. As the supernatural world begins to recover from the tension that nearly pushed it toward chaos, the aftermath of the conflict slowly starts to reveal itself. The confrontation between the traditional leaders and the revolutionary faction may have ended without total destruction, but the impact of those events continues to ripple through every vampire coven and werewolf pack. Trust has been shaken, long-standing beliefs have been questioned, and many supernatural beings now realize that their world can no longer remain exactly as it once was. For generations, secrecy was considered the only path to survival. Vampires and other supernatural creatures lived in the shadows, carefully hiding their existence from humanity while maintaining strict rules designed to prevent exposure. These rules shaped their societies, their traditions, and even their relationships with one another. But the events that just unfolded proved that not everyone believes in that system anymore. Among the younger generation especially, there is a growing awareness that the world around them is changing faster than ever before. Technology connects humans across continents in seconds. Satellites observe nearly every corner of the planet, and digital information spreads instantly across the globe. Living forever in total secrecy may no longer be as simple as it once was centuries ago. Even those who strongly believe in maintaining the old rules must now acknowledge that the future may require new strategies. For the main characters who once fought to protect their families and their fragile peace, this realization brings mixed emotions. On one hand, they feel relief that a devastating war was avoided. The supernatural world could have been destroyed by its own divisions, but instead it found a way, however difficult, to prevent total catastrophe. On the other hand, the conflict revealed deep disagreements that will not disappear overnight. Conversations begin taking place across the hidden world. Leaders of vampire covens gather in secret meetings, discussing what changes might be necessary to ensure stability in the years ahead. Werewolf packs, who have always protected their territories and the humans living within them, also begin questioning how their role might evolve if the supernatural community itself begins to transform. These discussions are not easy. Some believe that the revolutionary faction exposed dangerous weaknesses within the existing system. Others argue that the system itself is the only thing preventing humanity from discovering the supernatural world and reacting with fear and violence. Every perspective carries its own fears and hopes for the future. Meanwhile, the younger generation continues to grow into their abilities and responsibilities. They have witnessed firsthand how fragile peace can be, and this experience shapes their understanding of the world they are inheriting. Unlike previous generations who were raised strictly within one supernatural tradition, they represent something new, an unexpected connection between different species and different ways of life. This unique position gives them a perspective that older leaders often struggle to understand. They see the value in preserving traditions, but they also recognize that change may be necessary for survival. Instead of viewing these ideas as opposites, they begin searching for ways to combine them. For the older characters, watching this new generation step forward brings a mixture of pride and uncertainty. They remember what it was like to face impossible choices when their world was on the brink of destruction. Now they realize that the next chapter of the supernatural story may belong to those who grew up after those battles ended. During this time of reflection, the supernatural community also begins paying closer attention to the human world around them. Humans continue living their lives unaware of the secret societies existing just beyond their understanding. Cities expand, technology advances, and global communication grows stronger with every passing year. From the perspective of supernatural beings who have existed for decades, or even centuries, the speed of human progress is both fascinating and unsettling. The world they once knew has transformed dramatically. Places that were once quiet forests or isolated villages have become modern towns filled with cameras, internet networks, and constant activity. This changing environment forces supernatural groups to adapt their strategies for remaining hidden. New methods of communication, relocation, and observation are developed to ensure that secrecy can still be maintained in an increasingly connected world. These adaptations require cooperation between different covens and packs, further strengthening the alliances that formed during the recent conflict. Despite these efforts, small moments of tension continue appearing within the supernatural community. Not everyone agrees on how quickly change should occur or how much of the old system should remain intact. Some former supporters of the revolutionary movement quietly continue advocating for greater openness, believing that the supernatural world cannot hide forever. At the same time, many traditional leaders remain deeply committed to secrecy, convinced that revealing their existence to humanity would lead to fear, conflict, and possible extinction. These disagreements create an ongoing debate that may shape the future of their society for years to come. For the main characters who have experienced the dangers of both secrecy and exposure, finding a balanced path becomes one of their greatest challenges. They understand the risks involved with every possible choice. Their experiences have shown them that protecting the people they love sometimes requires difficult compromises. As they reflect on everything that has happened, they also begin focusing on rebuilding stability within their communities. Strengthening relationships between vampire covens and werewolf packs becomes an important step toward ensuring that future threats can be faced together rather than divided by old rivalries. These efforts lead to new agreements designed to promote cooperation and communication between different supernatural groups. While these agreements may not eliminate every disagreement, they create a stronger foundation for facing whatever challenges the future might bring. At the same time, life slowly begins returning to a sense of normalcy. Families spend time together without the constant fear of impending conflict. Younger members of the supernatural community continue learning about their abilities and responsibilities, guided by those who survive the most dangerous moments of their world's history. Moments of peace like these remind everyone why the struggle to protect their world was so important in the first place. Behind all the political debates and supernatural rivalries lies a simple truth. Every character is ultimately fighting for the chance to live peacefully with the people they love. Even so, the possibility of future challenges never completely disappears. The supernatural world has existed for centuries, and throughout that time it has faced countless unexpected dangers. New threats could appear from places no one has yet explored. Hidden secrets from the distant past might one day resurface. Because of this, the characters remain vigilant. They understand that peace is not something that can be taken for granted. It must be protected, nurtured, and sometimes defended when circumstances demand it. Yet despite these uncertainties, there is also a sense of hope that did not exist before. The recent conflict forced the supernatural community to confront difficult questions about its future. While those questions have not been fully answered, the willingness to discuss them openly represents an important step forward. The younger generation, in particular, carries this hope with them. They believe that their world does not have to repeat the same cycles of fear and secrecy that defined previous centuries. Instead, they envision a future where cooperation and understanding guide the decisions of supernatural society. For the characters who once stood at the center of the saga's greatest battles, seeing this new perspective emerge feels like the beginning of a new chapter rather than the end of a story. Their journey taught them that love, loyalty, and courage can overcome even the most powerful enemies. Now those lessons will guide the next generation as they shape the future of their world. And as the supernatural community looks ahead, one thing becomes clear. The story of vampires, werewolves, and the fragile balance between hidden worlds is far from finished. New challenges will rise, new alliances will form, and new heroes will step forward when the moment demands it. But no matter how much the world changes, the heart of the saga will always remain the same. A story about the power of connection, the strength of family, and the courage to protect the people who matter most. As time slowly moves forward after the intense events that reshaped the supernatural world, a new sense of stability begins to settle across different vampire covens and werewolf territories. The conflict that once threatened to divide their entire society forced many groups to face truths they had avoided for centuries. Now, instead of pretending those questions do not exist, the supernatural community begins cautiously searching for ways to adapt without losing the traditions that kept them alive for generations. For the characters who played central roles in protecting their world, this new period feels both peaceful and uncertain at the same time. Peace has returned, but it is not the same quiet peace that once existed before the crisis. Instead, it is a more thoughtful kind of calm. One where everyone understands that the world has changed and that maintaining balance will require constant awareness and cooperation. In many ways, the greatest transformation has taken place within the mindset of the supernatural community itself. The recent conflict forced vampire leaders, werewolf protectors, and independent supernatural beings to realize that their survival depends not only on secrecy, but also on unity. Divisions between different groups nearly led to disaster, and that lesson has left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed how close their world came to collapse. Because of this realization, communication between different covens and packs becomes far more frequent than it was in the past. Messages travel across territories, alliances are strengthened, and meetings are held where leaders discuss how to prevent similar conflicts from ever reaching such dangerous levels again. These gatherings represent something that rarely existed before, a shared effort to build a more stable future for every supernatural being. At the center of this evolving world are the characters who once stood on the front lines of every major conflict. Their experiences have given them a unique understanding of both the strengths and weaknesses within the supernatural system. They have seen what happens when fear and misunderstanding take control, and they know that preventing future crises requires more than simply enforcing old rules. For them, the responsibility of protecting their families now extends beyond physical safety. It also includes guiding the next generation through a world that is becoming more complicated with every passing year. The younger members of their community are growing up in an environment shaped by both ancient traditions and modern challenges, and helping them understand how to balance those forces becomes an important task. The younger generation continues developing abilities and perspectives that make them different from any supernatural beings who came before them. They have inherited the history of their families, but they are not limited by the same fears that shaped earlier centuries. Instead, they approach the future with curiosity and determination, eager to explore possibilities that older leaders might once have dismissed as impossible. This difference in perspective creates moments where the older and younger generations must learn from one another. The elders possess wisdom earned through decades or even centuries of experience, while the younger characters bring fresh ideas and the courage to imagine a different kind of future. When these viewpoints come together, they form a powerful combination capable of guiding the supernatural world through uncertain times. Meanwhile, life in the human world continues advancing at a remarkable pace. Cities expand, technology evolves, and global communication becomes even more sophisticated than before. For supernatural beings who must remain hidden, these developments present both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, modern technology makes it more difficult to remain completely invisible. Cameras, satellites, and digital records create countless ways for unusual events to be captured and shared instantly across the world. On the other hand, technology also provides new tools that supernatural groups can use to monitor their surroundings, communicate securely, and avoid drawing attention to themselves. Adapting to this new reality requires creativity and cooperation. Vampire covens that once lived in complete isolation now share information with others in order to stay ahead of potential risks. Werewolf packs strengthen their protective roles within their territories, ensuring that both humans and supernatural beings remain safe from unexpected threats. During this period of rebuilding, the supernatural community also begins exploring parts of its own history that were previously ignored or forgotten. Ancient records, legends, and hidden knowledge come back into focus as leaders search for guidance from the past. Some of these discoveries reveal fascinating insights into how supernatural societies evolved over centuries. These historical revelations sometimes show that earlier generations faced challenges surprisingly similar to those happening now. In certain periods of history, supernatural beings also struggled with questions about secrecy, cooperation, and their place in the human world. Learning how those ancestors navigated their dilemmas offers valuable lessons for the present. While much of the focus remains on preserving peace, there are still moments when unexpected dangers appear. The supernatural world is vast, and not every group agrees with the new efforts toward unity and stability. Occasionally, smaller conflicts arise when individuals or rogue groups attempt to pursue their own ambitions without considering the larger consequences. However, these situations are now handled differently than they once were. Instead of allowing isolated conflicts to grow into full-scale crises, the supernatural community works together to resolve problems quickly. Communication and cooperation prevent misunderstandings from escalating into violence. This new approach demonstrates how much the world has changed since the earlier days of constant rivalry and secrecy. While disagreements still exist, there is a shared understanding that preserving unity is the best way to ensure survival in a rapidly changing world. For the main characters, watching these developments unfold brings a sense of accomplishment. They know that the sacrifices they made during previous battles helped create the opportunity for this new era of cooperation. Even though the future remains uncertain, the foundations for something stronger and more balanced are beginning to take shape at the same time. The emotional bonds between the characters continue growing stronger. Years of shared experiences have created relationships built on deep trust and understanding. These connections remind them that no matter how complicated the supernatural world becomes, the most important part of their journey has always been protecting the people they care about. Family gatherings, quiet moments in familiar places, and simple conversations about the future become meaningful reminders of what they fought to preserve. These peaceful scenes provide a contrast to the dramatic conflicts that once defined their lives, showing that the possibility of happiness still exists even in a world filled with mystery and danger. The younger generation, inspired by the stories of past struggles, begins imagining how they might contribute to the future of their community. Some may focus on strengthening alliances between different supernatural groups, while others explore ways to improve the systems that protect their hidden world. Their optimism represents the next stage of the saga's journey. Instead of simply reacting to threats, they aim to shape a future where the supernatural community can thrive without repeating the mistakes of the past. As this chapter of the story reaches its closing moments, the world of vampires, werewolves, and hidden societies appears calmer than it has in many years. The conflicts that once threatened everything have been resolved, and new paths are beginning to emerge. Yet the story never truly ends. The supernatural world will always face new mysteries, new challenges, and new questions about its place within the greater human world. What matters most is that those who inhabit it are now better prepared to face whatever comes next. The lessons learned through love, sacrifice, and courage will continue guiding them forward. Each generation will carry those lessons into the future, building upon the foundation created by those who came before. And as long as these connections remain strong, the world of the saga will continue evolving, filled with adventure, emotion, and the timeless struggle between darkness and hope. As the supernatural world moves further into this new era of cautious peace, the effects of the previous conflicts continue shaping the decisions of both leaders and younger generations. Time has passed since the dramatic events that nearly divided their entire society. Yet the lessons from that period remain deeply embedded in the collective memory of vampire covens and werewolf packs. Instead of ignoring those memories, many within the supernatural community now see them as valuable reminders of how easily balance can collapse when trust disappears. The idea of unity, which once seemed almost impossible between certain supernatural groups, has slowly become a guiding principle for the future. For centuries, vampires and werewolves viewed one another with suspicion and hostility, each believing the other represented a threat to their survival. But the events that forced them to cooperate changed those perceptions in ways that cannot easily be reversed. While old rivalries have not completely vanished, there is now a growing awareness that cooperation is stronger than division. Because of this shift in thinking, meetings between different supernatural leaders become more common than they ever were before. Representatives from distant covens and packs gather to share information about unusual events, environmental changes, or rumors that might signal future threats. These meetings are not always easy, as centuries of mistrust cannot disappear overnight. However, the willingness to sit together and discuss common concerns represents a powerful step forward. For the characters who once stood at the center of the saga's greatest battles, these changes confirm that the sacrifices they made were not in vain. They understand that real peace does not mean the absence of challenges, but rather the ability to face those challenges together without allowing fear to divide them again. During this time, the younger generation continues discovering what it means to live within the supernatural world while also preparing for responsibilities that may one day fall upon their shoulders. Growing up in a community shaped by both ancient traditions and recent transformations gives them a perspective that is very different from the one held by previous generations. Instead of seeing the world through strict boundaries between species or territories, many younger supernatural beings begin viewing their community as something larger and more interconnected. They understand that their futures are tied together in ways that earlier leaders may not have fully recognized. This awareness encourages them to form friendships and partnerships that cross old divides. These relationships slowly begin strengthening the overall stability of the supernatural world. When individuals from different groups trust one another personally, it becomes much harder for misunderstandings to escalate into major conflicts. Communication improves, alliances grow stronger, and the possibility of unexpected cooperation increases. At the same time, the human world surrounding them continues evolving in ways that cannot be ignored. Technology becomes even more advanced, global travel increases, and information spreads faster than ever before. For supernatural beings who must remain hidden, these changes present constant challenges that require careful attention. Surveillance systems appear in places that once felt isolated. Social media allows people to share unusual experiences instantly with millions of others. Scientific research continues expanding humanity's understanding of biology and genetics, raising the possibility that someday humans might begin asking questions that lead dangerously close to the truth about supernatural existence. Because of these developments, many supernatural leaders begin exploring new strategies to ensure their hidden world remains protected. Some covens develop advanced monitoring systems designed to detect unusual human activity near their territories. Others focus on strengthening alliances with werewolf protectors, whose deep connection to the land often allows them to notice environmental changes long before anyone else. These cooperative efforts represent another major shift from the past. In earlier centuries, supernatural groups often handled their problems independently, rarely sharing information unless absolutely necessary. Now there is a growing understanding that collective awareness offers the best protection against unexpected dangers. Meanwhile, the main characters who have experienced the most dramatic chapters of this saga continue living their lives with a renewed appreciation for peace. After facing enemies capable of destroying everything they loved, even ordinary moments now carry deeper meaning. Spending time with family, watching younger members of their community grow, and enjoying the quiet beauty of familiar landscapes remind them why every struggle was worthwhile. These peaceful moments also allow them to reflect on how much their world has changed since the beginning of their journey. When they first became part of the supernatural community, everything felt uncertain and dangerous. They had to learn quickly how to survive among powerful beings, navigate complex traditions, and protect their relationships from forces determined to tear them apart. Now, years later, they find themselves guiding others through those same challenges. Their experiences have transformed them from uncertain newcomers into respected figures whose advice carries real influence. Younger supernatural beings often seek their guidance when facing difficult choices, knowing that their wisdom was earned through real struggles rather than distant legends. This role as mentors becomes an important part of their lives. Instead of simply reacting to threats, they now help shape the future of their community by sharing lessons about courage, responsibility, and compassion. They emphasize that strength alone is never enough to maintain peace. True stability requires understanding, patience, and the willingness to see beyond personal fears. While the supernatural world appears stable for the moment, there are still mysteries waiting to be explored. The vast history of vampire covens and werewolf packs contains countless stories that have never been fully understood. Ancient legends speak of powerful beings who once walked the earth long before modern supernatural societies were formed. Some historians within the supernatural community begin researching these legends more seriously, curious whether forgotten knowledge from the past might offer guidance for the future. These investigations uncover fascinating fragments of history, old alliances, mysterious disappearances, and events that shaped the earliest relationships between different supernatural species. Although many of these discoveries remain incomplete, they remind everyone that the world they inhabit is far older and more complex than most individuals realize. Each generation adds new chapters to a story that has been unfolding for centuries. For the younger characters especially, learning about this deep history becomes both inspiring and humbling. They realize that their current struggles are part of a much larger narrative that stretches far beyond their own lifetimes. Understanding this connection encourages them to think carefully about the decisions they make, knowing that those choices could influence generations that come after them. As the seasons change and life continues moving forward, the supernatural world gradually settles into a rhythm that feels balanced yet dynamic. Alliances remain strong, communication flows more freely, and the sense of shared purpose grows deeper with each passing year. This new chapter of the saga is not defined by constant conflict, but by growth, cooperation, and the determination to build a future stronger than the past. It shows that even a world filled with immortal beings must evolve if it hopes to survive the challenges of time. The characters who once fought to protect their loved ones now stand as guardians of a legacy built on sacrifice and unity. They know that future conflicts may still appear, but they also believe that the bonds created during their journey will help the supernatural community face whatever lies ahead. And as the story continues unfolding across forests, hidden towns, and distant territories, one truth remains at its heart: the power of connection between individuals, whether human, vampire, or werewolf, has always been the force capable of shaping the destiny of their world. As the supernatural world continues evolving in the years that follow the earlier conflicts, the balance between secrecy, unity, and survival becomes the central focus of every major decision made by vampire covens and werewolf packs. What once seemed like an impossible dream, cooperation between groups that had distrusted one another for centuries, has slowly transformed into a practical reality. It is not perfect, and disagreements still arise, but the foundation of communication and shared responsibility is stronger than it has ever been before. For the characters whose lives were once defined by constant danger, this period of stability offers something they never truly experienced during the earlier chapters of their journey: the chance to build a future rather than simply survive the present. The battles they fought and the sacrifices they made created an opportunity for their families and communities to grow without the shadow of immediate destruction hanging over them. Yet, even during this peaceful time, the supernatural world remains aware that change is inevitable. History has shown that long periods of calm often give way to unexpected challenges. Because of this, the leaders of different supernatural groups continue strengthening the alliances that were formed during the previous crisis. Instead of allowing those alliances to fade once danger has passed, they treat them as permanent connections designed to protect their world from whatever may come next. One of the most remarkable transformations within the supernatural community involves how knowledge is shared. In earlier centuries, many vampire covens guarded their information closely, believing that secrecy, even among their own kind, was the best way to maintain power and control. Now, however, more leaders recognize that sharing knowledge can prevent misunderstandings and reduce the risk of isolated conflicts growing into larger problems. This new approach leads to the creation of networks where supernatural groups exchange information about unusual events, environmental changes, or rumors that might indicate the emergence of new threats. These networks allow distant territories to remain connected in ways that would have been impossible in the past. For younger members of the supernatural community, growing up in this environment of cooperation feels natural. Unlike earlier generations who inherited centuries of rivalry and suspicion, they are learning to see other supernatural beings as allies rather than automatic enemies. Friendships form between individuals from different backgrounds, strengthening the sense that their world is becoming more united with each passing year. These friendships play a powerful role in shaping the future of the supernatural society. When individuals build trust across traditional boundaries, they create personal connections that can prevent large-scale conflicts from developing. Misunderstandings are resolved through dialogue rather than violence, and differences of opinion become opportunities for learning instead of reasons for division. At the same time, the human world surrounding them continues progressing at an extraordinary pace. Cities expand into areas that were once untouched wilderness. New forms of transportation make distant regions more accessible than ever before. Scientific discoveries push the limits of what humanity understands about life, genetics, and the universe itself. For supernatural beings who have existed for decades or even centuries, watching this rapid development is both fascinating and concerning. Humanity's curiosity has always been powerful, and every new discovery increases the possibility that one day humans might begin noticing patterns that reveal the existence of hidden supernatural communities. Because of this, maintaining secrecy remains an essential part of their survival strategy. However, the methods used to preserve that secrecy are constantly evolving. Supernatural groups now rely on advanced planning, careful observation, and cooperation with trusted allies to ensure that their activities never attract unwanted attention. These adaptations show how much the supernatural world has learned from its past struggles. Instead of reacting to crises after they appear, the community now focuses on prevention, identifying potential risks early and addressing them before they grow into serious threats. Meanwhile, the central characters who once stood at the heart of the saga continue embracing their roles as protectors and mentors. Their experiences during the most dangerous chapters of their lives have given them a deep understanding of what it takes to maintain peace in a complex world. Younger supernatural beings often look to them for guidance when facing difficult choices. Whether it involves managing extraordinary abilities, navigating relationships between different species, or understanding the responsibilities that come with immortality, the wisdom of those who survived earlier conflicts becomes an invaluable resource. Through these interactions, the legacy of the saga's earlier events continues shaping the future. Lessons learned through love, sacrifice, and courage are passed from one generation to the next, ensuring that the mistakes of the past are not easily repeated. During quieter moments, the characters sometimes reflect on how unlikely their journey once seemed. What began as a complicated relationship between individuals from completely different worlds eventually grew into something far greater, a story that reshaped the entire supernatural community. Their journey proved that even the deepest divisions can be overcome when people choose understanding over fear. It showed that loyalty and compassion can create alliances strong enough to withstand enormous pressure. Most importantly, it demonstrated that the choices made by individuals can influence the fate of entire worlds. As the years pass, the supernatural community begins focusing not only on survival, but also on growth. Some groups explore ways to improve cooperation between distant territories, creating systems that allow information and support to travel quickly when needed. Others concentrate on preserving the cultural traditions that define their identities. Ancient ceremonies, stories passed down through generations, and the unique customs of each coven or pack continue playing an important role in maintaining a sense of history and belonging. These traditions remind everyone that even as the world changes, the roots of their society remain deeply connected to the past. Honoring those traditions helps ensure that the wisdom of earlier generations is never forgotten at the same time. The younger generation brings creativity and innovation to the supernatural world. They are not afraid to question old assumptions or explore new ideas about how their society might evolve in the centuries ahead. This balance between tradition and innovation becomes the foundation of the supernatural community's future. By respecting the past while remaining open to change, they create a path that allows their world to remain stable while still adapting to the challenges of a modern era. For the main characters who helped guide their society through its most dangerous period, watching this transformation unfold is deeply rewarding. They know that peace will never be permanent, but they also believe that the bonds formed during their journey have created something strong enough to endure future trials. Even as new generations rise and new stories begin to unfold, the core message of their journey continues guiding the supernatural world. As the supernatural world continues moving forward into a new era shaped by unity and careful adaptation, the sense of stability that now surrounds many vampire covens and werewolf territories begins to feel stronger with each passing year. The conflicts that once threatened to divide their society have gradually transformed into lessons that guide future decisions. Instead of allowing those memories to create fear, the supernatural community uses them as reminders of why cooperation and communication are essential for survival. For many within this hidden world, the idea of long-term peace once seemed impossible. Centuries of mistrust, territorial disputes, and rigid traditions created divisions that appeared permanent. Yet the extraordinary events that forced different groups to stand together revealed something powerful. When supernatural beings choose understanding instead of rivalry, they can create a stability far stronger than any individual power. This realization continues influencing how the supernatural community organizes itself. Leaders from various covens and packs now work together to maintain systems that allow them to respond quickly if new dangers appear. Instead of operating in isolation, they share information, resources, and strategies designed to protect both their people and the secrecy that keeps their existence hidden from humanity. One important development during this period involves the creation of new communication networks between distant territories. In the past, a threat emerging in one region might remain unknown to others until it was too late to respond effectively. Now, trusted representatives maintain contact across large distances, ensuring that unusual events or suspicious activities are reported and understood before they have the chance to grow into something more dangerous. These systems rely heavily on trust, something that was once very rare among certain supernatural groups. Building that trust required years of shared experiences and mutual support, but the results are now visible everywhere. Cooperation has become a normal part of daily life rather than an emergency measure used only during times of crisis. For the younger generation growing up in this environment, the idea that vampires and werewolves were once bitter enemies often feels like a story from another age. They hear about those conflicts through the memories of older members of their community, yet their own experiences are shaped by friendship, collaboration, and shared responsibility. This generational shift represents one of the most important transformations in the entire saga. The younger characters carry the legacy of their families, but they are not trapped by the same fears that shaped earlier centuries. Their willingness to build relationships across traditional boundaries creates a sense that the supernatural world is becoming more unified with every new generation. Many of these younger individuals also possess abilities that continue surprising even the most experienced leaders. As they grow and learn to control their powers, they discover ways to use those abilities not just for protection, but also for strengthening connections between different supernatural groups. Their talents become tools for communication, understanding, and cooperation. Watching this new generation develop fills the older characters with both pride and hope. They remember the difficult path that led to this moment, and seeing the future take shape through the confidence and optimism of younger members reminds them that their struggles truly mattered at the same time. The world beyond their hidden society continues evolving at a remarkable speed. Human technology advances in ways that would have seemed impossible just a few decades earlier. Artificial intelligence, global data networks, and scientific breakthroughs reshape how humans understand their own existence. For supernatural beings observing these changes, the pace of human progress raises important questions about the long-term future of secrecy. The hidden world has survived for centuries by remaining invisible, but the tools humans now possess make it increasingly difficult to guarantee that unusual events will remain unnoticed forever. Because of this, discussions about the future occasionally return to the question that once divided the supernatural community: whether secrecy should remain the ultimate goal or whether some form of careful coexistence with humanity might someday become necessary. While most leaders still believe that secrecy remains the safest path, the willingness to discuss alternative possibilities represents another sign of how much the community has evolved. Instead of reacting with fear to every new idea, supernatural society has become more open to exploring solutions that balance tradition with practicality. The main characters who once faced these difficult questions during the earlier conflicts continue offering their perspective during these discussions. Their experiences taught them that every decision involving the human world carries enormous consequences. They understand both the danger of exposure and the potential risks of ignoring the rapid changes happening around them. Their guidance helps ensure that any discussions about the future remain thoughtful and cautious rather than impulsive. They encourage patience, reminding others that major decisions affecting an entire civilization must always be made carefully. During this time of reflection and growth, everyday life within the supernatural world becomes richer and more connected than ever before. Gatherings between different covens and packs become opportunities not only for strategy, but also for celebration. Shared traditions, storytelling, and cultural exchanges strengthen the bonds that now unite groups who once lived completely separate lives. These gatherings remind everyone that their world is not defined only by conflict or survival. It is also filled with history, creativity, and the unique identities of each supernatural culture. Preserving these traditions while continuing to build unity becomes an important goal for leaders and younger members alike. Meanwhile, the central characters find themselves appreciating the quieter moments that once seemed impossible during the height of earlier dangers. Walking through familiar forests, watching the next generation grow stronger, and simply enjoying the presence of family now carry a deep sense of meaning. These moments of peace do not erase the memories of past struggles, but they transform those memories into something valuable. Every challenge they overcame helped shape the stronger world that now surrounds them. Of course, the supernatural universe remains vast and mysterious. Even with stronger alliances and better communication, there are still parts of the world that few covens have ever explored. Ancient legends speak of distant territories where unknown supernatural beings may exist, hidden far from the societies that dominate most known regions. Occasionally, travelers or scouts return with stories about unusual sightings or mysterious figures encountered in remote areas. These stories spark curiosity among younger supernatural beings who wonder whether their world might be even larger and more diverse than anyone realized. Although many of these rumors remain unconfirmed, they remind everyone that the story of the supernatural world is far from finished. New discoveries, unexpected encounters, and unexplored territories continue offering opportunities for future adventures. For the main characters who help protect their world during its most dangerous moments, these possibilities represent the next stage of the journey. Instead of focusing only on defense, the supernatural community now has the opportunity to explore, learn, and grow in ways that were impossible during the years of constant conflict. This shift from survival to exploration symbolizes the true success of everything they fought for. By protecting their families and building alliances strong enough to overcome ancient rivalries, they created a future where new generations can dream about possibilities rather than simply fearing the next battle. As the supernatural world continues evolving, the story that began with unlikely relationships and dangerous secrets expands into something far greater. It becomes a narrative about transformation, how individuals, communities, and entire civilizations can change when courage and compassion guide their choices. The bonds formed through love, loyalty, and sacrifice continue shaping every decision made by those who inhabit this hidden universe. These connections ensure that even as new challenges appear, the supernatural community will face them together rather than divided. And as this chapter of the saga reaches its final moments, one truth becomes clear above all others. The journey that began with uncertainty and danger has grown into a legacy of unity, resilience, and hope. The supernatural world is no longer defined only by ancient rivalries or secret battles fought in the shadows. Instead, it has become a living story about the strength of connection and the belief that even the most complicated worlds can find balance when their people choose cooperation over fear. As the supernatural world continues to evolve after years of transformation, the sense of unity that now connects many vampire covens and werewolf packs begins to define an entirely new era. The conflicts that once threatened to tear their society apart have gradually become distant memories, remembered not as sources of fear, but as powerful lessons that shaped the path forward. Those events proved that survival in a changing world requires more than strength. It requires trust, patience, and the courage to adapt. In this new chapter of the saga, the hidden world of supernatural beings feels more connected than it has in centuries. Alliances that once existed only during moments of crisis have matured into lasting partnerships. Communication flows between distant territories, and leaders who once guarded their secrets carefully now recognize that cooperation provides a stronger defense against future dangers. For the characters who stood at the center of the earlier struggles, this transformation represents the fulfillment of everything they fought to protect. When their journey first began, the supernatural world was filled with suspicion and division. Ancient rivalries shaped every decision, and the possibility of lasting peace seemed almost impossible. Yet through sacrifice, loyalty, and unwavering determination, those barriers slowly began to fall. Relationships that once defied the rules of their society helped reveal a new truth, that the bonds between individuals could be stronger than the traditions that kept their worlds apart. Now, years later, the results of those choices are visible everywhere. Younger generations of supernatural beings grow up in a community that values cooperation rather than isolation. Friendships form across old boundaries, and the idea of working together to protect their shared future has become a normal part of life. These younger members of the supernatural world also carry something else that earlier generations lacked: the belief that their future can be shaped through choice rather than controlled entirely by ancient traditions. They respect the wisdom of the past, but they also understand that survival requires flexibility and imagination. Many of them spend time studying the history of their society, learning about the struggles that shape the alliances they now enjoy. Stories about past conflicts, dangerous enemies, and courageous decisions are passed down not as warnings alone, but as inspiration. These stories remind them that every generation has the power to change the course of history when they refuse to accept fear as the final answer. Meanwhile, the human world surrounding them continues advancing with remarkable speed. New technologies appear constantly, reshaping the way people communicate, travel, and explore the planet. Scientific discoveries reveal mysteries about the universe that humans once believed would remain unsolved forever. For supernatural beings who must remain hidden, this constant progress creates both fascination and caution. Humanity's curiosity grows stronger with every new breakthrough, and the tools now available to scientists and researchers make it easier than ever for unusual patterns to be noticed. Because of this, maintaining secrecy remains an essential responsibility shared by every member of the supernatural community. Yet the methods used to protect that secrecy have become far more advanced than they were in earlier centuries. Cooperative networks monitor potential risks, ensuring that any unusual events are addressed quickly and quietly. Trusted allies communicate across large distances, allowing different groups to remain informed about changes in the human world that might affect their safety. This system of shared awareness represents one of the most important achievements of the new era. Instead of reacting to threats alone, supernatural communities now rely on each other's knowledge and experience to prevent problems before they escalate. For the main characters who once lived through the most dangerous periods of their history, watching this system succeed brings a sense of satisfaction that is difficult to describe. Their struggles helped create the foundation for a stronger and more united society. Yet they also understand that peace is never permanent. The supernatural world has existed for centuries, and throughout that time it has faced countless unexpected challenges. New threats may eventually appear, emerging from distant territories or hidden corners of the world that remain largely unexplored. However, unlike the past, the supernatural community is now prepared to face those challenges together. The alliances formed during earlier conflicts have proven that cooperation can overcome even the most powerful enemies. This understanding creates a sense of quiet confidence within their society. They know that whatever the future brings, they will not face it alone. During peaceful moments, the central characters often reflect on the extraordinary journey that brought them to this point. What began as a complicated relationship between individuals from completely different worlds eventually grew into something that reshaped an entire civilization. The choices they made, sometimes driven by love, sometimes by necessity, created a ripple effect that reached far beyond their own lives. Those choices helped unite groups that once viewed each other as enemies and inspired a generation to imagine a different future. Looking back, it becomes clear that the true power of their story was never simply about supernatural abilities or immortal strength. It was about the courage to challenge expectations and the willingness to believe that understanding could replace fear. This message continues guiding the younger generation as they step into leadership roles of their own. They know that the peace they now enjoy was built through sacrifice, and they are determined to protect it. At the same time, they remain curious about the wider world that still holds many mysteries. Rumors occasionally surface about distant regions where unknown supernatural beings might exist, living far beyond the territories currently known to most covens and packs. These stories inspire a sense of exploration among younger supernatural adventurers who wish to learn more about the hidden history of their world. Although such journeys require caution, they also represent the next stage of growth for a society that once focused only on survival. Exploration, discovery, and cooperation now stand alongside secrecy and protection as guiding principles for the future. Together, these ideas form the foundation of a new supernatural era, one where knowledge and unity replace fear and isolation. For the characters whose lives shaped the destiny of this world, witnessing this transformation feels like the closing chapter of a long and remarkable journey. They have seen their society evolve from division to unity, from constant danger to cautious stability. Their legacy is not simply the enemies they defeated or the battles they survived. It is the world they helped create, a world where different beings can stand side by side, protecting the fragile balance that allows them all to exist. As the story reaches its final moments, the forests, towns, and hidden places that once served as the stage for countless dramatic events now stand peaceful beneath the passing seasons. Life continues quietly, filled with moments of connection, growth, and hope. New generations will eventually write their own chapters in this saga, facing challenges that no one can yet imagine. But the foundation created by those who came before will always remain, guiding them whenever difficult choices appear. The supernatural world will continue changing, just as every world does. Yet the values that carried it through its darkest moments, loyalty, courage, and love, will always remain at its heart. And so the story that began with mystery, danger, and forbidden connections ends not with an ending, but with a promise. A promise that the world of vampires, werewolves, and hidden alliances will continue moving forward, shaped by the bonds between those who believe that unity is stronger than feared. As the supernatural world moves deeper into this new era of stability and cooperation, a quiet transformation begins unfolding across the hidden societies of vampires and werewolves. What once felt like a fragile piece is gradually becoming something stronger, an evolving system built on trust, shared responsibility, and the lessons learned from centuries of conflict. For the first time in a very long time, the supernatural community is not merely reacting to danger. It is actively shaping the future it wants to create. In earlier centuries, survival meant isolation. Vampire covens guarded their territories carefully, rarely interacting with outsiders unless absolutely necessary. Werewolf packs focused on protecting their own lands and people, maintaining strict boundaries that kept them separate from the complicated politics of vampire society. These divisions were considered normal, even necessary. But the events that brought these groups together during the most dangerous moments of their history changed everything. The realization that cooperation could prevent destruction forced supernatural leaders to reconsider many of the traditions they had followed for generations. Now, instead of avoiding one another, different groups often work side by side to maintain the balance that protects their hidden world. This transformation can be seen most clearly in the new councils that have begun forming between various covens and packs. These gatherings are not designed to control every aspect of supernatural life, but to ensure that important decisions affecting the entire community are discussed openly. Leaders meet periodically to exchange information, resolve disputes, and coordinate efforts that protect both supernatural beings and the humans who unknowingly live alongside them. The existence of these councils represents a dramatic shift from the past. Instead of allowing powerful individuals to dominate decisions through fear or tradition, the supernatural world is slowly moving toward a system based on cooperation and shared responsibility. It is not perfect, and disagreements still arise, but the willingness to communicate has already prevented several conflicts from escalating into something more dangerous. For the characters who once stood at the center of the saga's most dramatic events, watching this transformation unfold is deeply meaningful. They remember a time when every decision carried enormous risk and when misunderstandings could quickly turn into deadly confrontations. Seeing a new generation grow up in a more connected and cooperative world reminds them that their struggles created something lasting. Their role within this evolving society has also changed over time. Instead of constantly fighting enemies or defending their existence, they now serve as mentors, advisors, and examples for those who are just beginning to understand the responsibilities that come with supernatural life. Young vampires and werewolves often seek them out for guidance. Some want to learn how to control their abilities, while others hope to understand the complicated history that shaped the alliances they now enjoy. These conversations allow the wisdom of past experiences to pass from one generation to the next, ensuring that the lessons learned through hardship are never forgotten. At the same time, The younger generation continues bringing new energy and ideas into the supernatural community. Having grown up in a world defined more by cooperation than conflict, they often approach challenges with creativity rather than fear. They are comfortable forming friendships across traditional boundaries and are eager to explore possibilities that older leaders once dismissed. This openness leads to interesting developments within supernatural society. Some groups begin organizing collaborative efforts designed to improve communication between distant territories. Others experiment with ways to use modern technology carefully and responsibly while still protecting the secrecy that keeps their existence hidden from humans. Technology, in particular, has become an increasingly important topic of discussion. The human world continues advancing at a breathtaking pace. Artificial intelligence, satellite monitoring, advanced genetic research, and global communication networks are transforming the planet in ways that few could have predicted. For supernatural beings who rely on secrecy, these developments create both challenges and opportunities. On one hand, the tools available to humans make it easier for unusual events to be recorded, analyzed, and shared widely. On the other hand, those same tools can be used by supernatural communities to monitor potential threats, coordinate responses, and ensure that their presence remains unnoticed. Some younger supernatural members have even begun specializing in understanding human technology. They study how digital systems work, how data moves across networks, and how surveillance operates in modern cities. Their goal is not to interfere with human society, but to ensure that supernatural activities never appear in places where they might attract unwanted attention. This careful adaptation reflects how much the hidden world has matured since the earlier days of the saga. Instead of fearing every change in the human world, the supernatural community now focuses on understanding those changes and adjusting its strategies accordingly. Meanwhile, everyday life within vampire covens and werewolf packs continues growing richer and more connected. Celebrations of ancient traditions take on new meaning when they are shared with allies who once stood as rivals. Cultural exchanges allow different groups to learn from one another, strengthening bonds that go beyond simple political alliances. These gatherings often include storytelling sessions where elders recount the dramatic moments that shaped their history. Tales of bravery, sacrifice, and impossible choices remind everyone how fragile their world once was. For younger listeners, these stories serve as both inspiration and caution. They learn that peace did not appear magically. It was built through courage and perseverance during the darkest moments of their society's history. While the supernatural world enjoys this new period of growth, curiosity about unexplored territories continues expanding. Scouts occasionally travel to distant regions where few covens have ever ventured. These journeys sometimes reveal small groups of supernatural beings living quietly outside the established networks of communication. When such discoveries occur, the response is very different from what it might have been centuries earlier. Instead of viewing unknown groups as threats, the supernatural community now approaches them with cautious curiosity and the possibility of friendship. Many of these newly discovered groups eventually join the wider network of alliances, bringing their own traditions and knowledge into the shared community. These encounters remind everyone that the supernatural world is far larger and more diverse than any single society could fully understand. Each new connection adds another piece to the complex puzzle of their hidden civilization. For the central characters whose journey helped transform this world, seeing these connections grow is perhaps the greatest reward of all. The love and loyalty that once seemed like personal struggles have become symbols of what is possible when people refuse to let fear control their choices. Their story is now told across many supernatural communities as an example of how individuals can influence the destiny of an entire world. It demonstrates that even the oldest traditions can evolve when courage and compassion guide the way forward. As the seasons continue changing and new generations step confidently into the future, the supernatural world stands stronger than it has in centuries. It remains hidden from humanity, protected by the careful efforts of those who understand the delicate balance that keeps both worlds safe. Yet within that hidden existence, something remarkable has taken root, a society that values unity, cooperation, and the belief that even immortal beings must continue learning and growing. And as this chapter of the saga moves toward its closing moments, one truth becomes clear above all others. The story that began with forbidden connections and dangerous secrets has grown into something far greater. A living legacy carried forward by every vampire, werewolf, and ally who believes that the future is strongest when it is built together. As the years continue to pass in this evolving supernatural era, a quiet but meaningful shift begins to shape the future of vampire and werewolf societies. The peace that once felt fragile now carries a deeper sense of permanence, not because conflict has completely disappeared, but because the communities that protect this hidden world have learned how to face challenges together. What makes this era unique is not simply the absence of large-scale battles, but the presence of a shared vision. For centuries, supernatural beings survived by focusing only on immediate threats. Their existence revolved around secrecy, territory, and strict traditions that ensured survival but rarely allowed room for progress. Now, for the first time in their long history, many of them are beginning to think far beyond survival. They are thinking about legacy. Legacy, in this sense, does not only refer to power or influence. Instead, it refers to the type of world they want future generations to inherit. A world where vampires and werewolves no longer see each other primarily as potential enemies, but as allies responsible for protecting a delicate balance between their hidden lives and the human civilization surrounding them. In quiet forests, remote mountains, and small towns scattered across the globe, supernatural communities continue strengthening the relationships that were once forged during moments of crisis. Trust, which once developed slowly and cautiously, now grows naturally between individuals who grew up hearing stories of unity rather than division. Younger vampires and werewolves often spend time learning about one another's traditions. What once seemed mysterious or dangerous is now approached with curiosity and respect. These exchanges of culture, history, and experience help create a sense of belonging that stretches far beyond the boundaries of any single coven or pack. At the same time, the supernatural world continues developing systems designed to ensure its safety in an increasingly complex human society. Communication networks that once operated quietly between small groups have expanded into a far more organized structure. Trusted members of various communities act as watchers, observers who keep track of unusual events that might threaten secrecy. Their role is not to interfere with human affairs, but to ensure that supernatural activity never attracts attention that could expose their existence. These watchers share information with leaders across different territories, allowing the entire network to respond quickly whenever something unexpected occurs. In many ways, this quiet coordination has become the backbone of the supernatural world's modern stability. Despite these advancements, the most important element of this new era remains the individuals who carry the memory of past struggles. Those who lived through the most dramatic events of earlier years understand better than anyone how fragile peace can be. They remember moments when fear nearly destroyed everything they cared about. They remember the difficult choices that had to be made when survival seemed uncertain. And they remember the courage it took to trust people who were once considered enemies. Because of those memories, they continue guiding the younger generation with patience and honesty. They do not hide the mistakes of the past. Instead, they speak openly about them, explaining how those mistakes eventually led to greater understanding. These conversations often happen during quiet evenings when stories are shared beneath the night sky or around fires that illuminate the dark forests where many supernatural beings still feel most at home. In these moments, history becomes something alive, something that shapes the character of those who listen. The younger listeners absorb every detail. They hear about conflicts that once threatened the entire supernatural world. They hear about unlikely friendships that changed the course of events. And they hear about the powerful idea that love and loyalty can overcome even the oldest divisions. For them, these stories are more than history. They are reminders that the peaceful world they now inhabit was not inevitable. It was built step by step through courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to imagine a different future. Meanwhile, beyond the quiet forests and hidden communities where supernatural beings live, the human world continues transforming at an extraordinary pace. Cities grow larger, technology grows smarter, and humanity continues pushing the boundaries of science and exploration. Humans now look toward the stars with renewed ambition, planning missions that may one day carry them far beyond the planet they have always called home. Artificial intelligence assists in solving problems once thought impossible. Medical breakthroughs extend human lifespans and improve the quality of life for millions. From the perspective of immortal or long-lived supernatural beings, watching this rapid progress can be both fascinating and humbling. Humans, despite their short lifespans, possess an incredible capacity for innovation. Their curiosity drives them forward constantly, even when faced with enormous challenges. This determination reminds many supernatural observers of something important. Change is the natural rhythm of the universe. Just as human civilization continues evolving, the hidden world of vampires and werewolves must also evolve if it hopes to survive for centuries to come. Remaining frozen in ancient traditions would eventually create weaknesses that the modern world could expose. Because of this, supernatural leaders encourage a careful balance between tradition and adaptation. Ancient values, loyalty, discipline, responsibility, remain central to their culture. But alongside those values grows a willingness to learn from the changing world around them. Some younger vampires pursue knowledge about human science, history, and technology. Others dedicate themselves to exploring distant territories where supernatural communities may still exist outside the established alliances. These explorations sometimes reveal forgotten pieces of history, old legends that turn out to contain fragments of truth, ancient covens that once disappeared from known records, or unusual supernatural abilities that have rarely been seen before. Each discovery adds depth to the understanding of a world that is far older and more complex than most humans could ever imagine. For the central figures whose journey helped reshape the supernatural world, witnessing these discoveries feels like watching the next chapter of a story they helped begin. They no longer stand alone at the center of every conflict or decision. Instead, they observe as new leaders rise, bringing their own perspectives and talents into the growing community. Their influence remains strong, but it is no longer defined by struggle. It is defined by legacy. They represent proof that unity can exist even between those who once lived on opposite sides of ancient rivalries. Their lives demonstrate that courage is not only about fighting enemies. It is also about believing in the possibility of change. And perhaps most importantly, their story reminds everyone that the strongest bonds are often formed in the most unexpected ways. As the supernatural world continues moving forward, its future remains filled with mystery. New challenges will undoubtedly appear, just as they always have throughout history. Unknown forces may eventually test the strength of the alliances that now protect this hidden civilization. But unlike the past, those alliances are built on understanding rather than fear. And that difference changes everything. Because when individuals from different backgrounds choose to trust one another, they create something stronger than any single power. They create a community capable of adapting, learning, and surviving no matter what the future brings. The forests, mountains, and hidden towns where supernatural beings live will continue witnessing new stories for generations to come. Some of those stories will involve adventure, exploration, and discovery. Others will focus on quieter moments, friendships, family, and the slow but steady growth of a society that has finally learned how to balance power with wisdom. Through it all, one truth will remain at the heart of this world. The saga that began with secrecy and danger ultimately became a story about connection. Connection between individuals, connection between different worlds, and connection between the past that shaped them and the future they continue building together. As long as those connections endure, the legacy of this supernatural universe will never truly end.